Hey honeys, this is your host and question mark of a person, Heather David, and you are listening to Life as a Question Mark podcast. I was honestly going to be making an announcement that I was going to be taking a 1 to 2 week break, and this is because of some unplanned life events that has been happening over the past 2 weeks. I had every intention of doing the work to have a podcast to you all out yesterday, but I was having really bad vertigo yesterday and pain so bad to the point where it felt like the only way to get rid of the pain was if someone was to shoot me right in the head. It was that bad. By the time I felt a little better, it was about 5 o'clock at night, and my original outline script for this week's episode, what it was supposed to be, wasn't done yet, and I hadn't even recorded anything yet, and it typically takes me about 3 hours, roughly, to edit a podcast, depending on the length of it, of course, to make it where I'm semi-pleased on how it is to post it and have the episode go live. It also bothers me that I've had several episodes now that have come out late, and I hate that keeps happening because I have once I have this idea in my mind that I'm going to do something and get something done on a certain date, I just have to get it done or else it consistently bothers me. It doesn't matter if something extreme happens where it's out of my power and, I'm just that type of person. So my original plan yesterday was to take 1 to 2 weeks off from posting any more episodes until then, but I was going to take the time off to prepare for other future episodes and record some episodes ahead of time so I can prevent this from happening again. I was going to record all this yesterday, but then I didn't feel good again, and by the time I felt good enough again to record, my family came back home and it was too loud for me to even attempt to record. So I was going to record the spiel, edit, and post it today. However, then something happened last night. So, last night I got this Facebook message, and it was from one of the girls I talked about in the podcast. And I'm not going to read this whole entire message because it's a very personal message, but I'm going to give you the lowdown. And of course, before this podcast comes out, I am going to message her back, a very personal message myself. But she told me that she supports the podcast, she's been following the podcast journey, and that she realizes this story was about her, and that she apologizes about everything that she has done. And hearing my stories, realizes that she's done wrong in her ways, and she's willing to make it right in her ways, and that she's very sorry, da-da-da-da. Honestly, this girl, she was just a bystander in everything. The one thing that she's really done was the prank phone call, and I just really... I forgive her in a sense. In a way, I'm still holding on to pain due to trauma and things that need to be fixed. But above all else, I recognize that she's a bystander and everything else, and I can't hold a grudge against her. And I forgive her. And the fact that she realizes this and that she is apologizing shows me that she's a big enough person to do this. And it's incredible for someone to be able to do that. That's pretty ballsy. Well, ballsy in a good way, let's say that. And I admire that. I admire someone who can own up to the bad things that they have done in the past. So, and she told me how she supports the podcast and she hopes I keep continuing to tell my story and that I continue to do the podcast. And I realized, dang, I can't take a break right now. I gotta keep muscling through, even if it's a quick podcast. So that's what I'm doing today. It's not going to be a very long one, obviously, but I just had to come out and tell a story. But I am very committed in this podcast for the long run. I eventually hope to make it into something big and maybe even make it into a business someday. And maybe I can have it to a point where I don't have to work another job. This could be my main job, and I can focus on it more and get it done the right way and maybe have people to help me and get it out on time. We can only dream though, right? It's fine. Actually, today I'm recording in my car too. I meant to say that in the very beginning. What is that car doing? So I'm parked outside of Albany Med today for a family thing that has occurred. So it's a little different. I'll obviously post a picture later on. This car is parked almost directly behind me and make me kind of nervous. This black Subaru. So I'm not going to get out of my car for a while. I'm just going to continue podcasting and all that good stuff. Obviously sketchy. But anyway, back to my current conversation. It is very hard when you are working pretty close to a full-time job at 40 hours a week and doing everything on your own, plus your own personal duties like laundry and bills and making sure things are getting done, making sure your animals are taken care of, all that stuff, making sure you're clean, making sure you're fed, the basic necessities, I appreciate all of you and your continuing support. That's what's driving me to continue to keep doing this podcast. I'm still trying to figure out everything, obviously, but I will persevere like I always do and come back with a solution bigger and stronger, like always. I very strongly believe that this is the type of thing that I am meant to do in life. And I will make this happen. You marked my words. I actually have a couple different topics planned for the future. Some fun, different topics I'd like to talk about. And some that will make you say, what TF, Heather? What TF? And just shake your head. Some future topic examples that I'm going to talk about in the future are about angel numbers, eating disorders, talking about my eating disorder and what I went through with it, educating you all on real-life historical adventures. Yeah, adventures. Events! Sure, we could talk about historic adventures around, but historical events. Oh my gosh. And how I make screw-ups like that, and the 5 chakras I'm going to talk about. And there is so much more that I'd like to talk about that you guys have no idea what you guys are going to be in for. The back to dance season is almost here, and every ballerina needs the proper equipment. If you don't have your equipment yet, don't worry, I've got you covered with balletsets.com. Ballet Sets has an awesome array of gorgeous items such as leotards, pants, skirts, shorts, and most importantly, shoes. Dance can be so dang expensive. Take it from me, and I understand that for sure, especially being an adult. But you don't have to worry, because they gave me a very special discount code to share with all of you. If you use the discount code Heather80 at checkout, then you will receive 80% off your entire order. That's right. 80% off your entire order. What a bargain. Make sure that you are using the discount code Heather80 at checkout on balletsets.com. Make sure that you and your loved ones are ready and stacked for this year's dance season and looking glamorous too. I even have some ideas on which guests I would like to have come on the pod in the future and what we might talk about. This even goes for some big heavy hitters that I'd love to have on. But in order to be able to get some big heavy hitters on here, I'm going to need you all to help because this girl just can't make everything happen on her own, unfortunately. Try as I might, I just can't. So rate, reviewing, and subscribing always helps. Rate and reviewing the pod always helps new listeners find the podcast and listen to it. Then they can share the pod with their loved ones and their favorite stranger. Subscribing to the podcast automatically downloads the podcast onto wherever you listen to the podcast when any new episode drops so that you don't have to. It's already there waiting for you to listen to it. Also, telling everyone about the podcast always helps, especially when you tell your favorite stranger. An extra way that you can show some support to the podcast is by making a donation to the podcast. You can do this by clicking on the support link in the show notes in every episode, clicking the support button on the podcast's website, or by clicking the payment button in the link tree. All donations go towards the podcast expenses, not towards my own personal expenses. They could go towards the subscriptions I use for the editing program to edit this podcast. Or they could go towards a subscription at the website that I get the podcast website through. Or for traveling expenses to go to interviewing a guest for the podcast whenever I go to them. You can also converse with the pod and other listeners on the podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Life is a Question Mark. You can also follow myself on my own personal Instagram and TikTok at Miss D's World 2022. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the pod. I'll talk to you guys next week. Until then, keep doing better.